The dragon did not roar. It did not breathe fire. It did not even lift its head when the chains pulled tight around its neck and dragged it across the black marble floor of the throne chamber. The alien court expected a show. Instead, they saw something broken. Hundreds of nobles watched from their silver balconies. Their armor shone under the blue flames that burned along the walls. The great hall was built for victory speeches and war celebrations. Today, it held silence thick as smoke. At the end of the hall, on a throne carved from the bones of ancient beasts, sat King Varkesh. His golden eyes narrowed as the dragon was forced to kneel. This, the king announced, his voice echoing, is what failure looks like. The dragon's wings were twisted. One dragged uselessly along the floor. Its scales were dull instead of bright crimson. A deep scar ran along its spine where ceremonial armor had once been fused. The court whispered, "Defective, useless, shameful." Varkesh stood and stepped down from his throne. He circled the dragon slowly, like a hunter studying weak prey. "It cannot fly," he said loudly. "It cannot breathe plasma. It cannot fight. It cannot even stand without trembling." The dragon tried to rise. Its legs shook violently. It fell again. Laughter rolled across the chamber. The king raised one clawed hand, and the laughter quieted. "In our empire," he said, "strength is law, weakness is rot, and rot must be displayed so others learn." He turned toward the tall doors at the far end of the hall. "Bring in the human." The doors opened. A single human walked inside, small compared to the armored aliens around him. His name was Daniel Hale. He had once worked on distant frontier worlds as a combat medic. Now he served as a veterinarian for a rare alien species under imperial contract. He did not wear armor, only a simple gray coat with medical tools clipped to the belt. He walked calmly across the floor. The court stared at him as if he were another animal brought for amusement. King Varkesh smiled coldly. "Human," he said, "you claim your kind values life. You claim you can mend what others discard." Daniel stopped several steps away from the dragon. He could smell burned metal and old blood. The king gestured toward the broken creature. "Take this failure. Fix it if humans truly believe in miracles." The court burst into laughter again. Some nobles leaned forward eagerly, waiting for the human to shrink back. Daniel did not move at first. He looked at the dragon. Really looked. Up close. He saw more than twisted wings. The scars were not natural battle wounds. They were clean cuts. Surgical. Precise. The spine ridge showed signs of force fusion. The damage was not from birth. It had been done. The dragon's massive head remained low. Its eyes were open but unfocused. Not wild. Not angry. Ashamed. Daniel had seen that look before. Soldiers after losing a squad. Animals after abuse. Creatures that believed they had failed simply by surviving. He stepped closer. Gasps spread through the chamber. The dragon did not snap at him. It did not growl. It flinched. Daniel crouched slowly, keeping his movements soft. He placed his medical case on the floor. King Varkesh watched with amusement. "Well," the king said, "does your miracle begin?" Daniel did not answer. He reached out one hand. The dragon's body tensed, but it did not strike. His fingers brushed gently against a scale near the creature's neck. The surface was cold. The hall became quiet, very quiet. Daniel leaned slightly to examine the spine scar. He saw nerve damage, inflammation, signs of untreated trauma. The wings were not useless. They were restrained by pain and poor healing. The dragon's breathing was shallow. Daniel spoke softly, his voice low enough that only the dragon could hear. "You're not broken," he murmured. The dragon's eye shifted. It focused on him. For a moment, something passed between them. Not fire, not rage, understanding. King Varkesh's tail struck the floor impatiently. "Human," he said sharply, "you stand in my court. Bow before your king." Daniel remained crouched. He finished examining the scars along the dragon's side. He saw marks of restraint, not failure. Punishment, not defect. Slowly he stood. The nobles expected him to turn toward the throne. Instead, Daniel stepped back toward the dragon. He lowered himself onto one knee, but he did not face the king. He faced the dragon. He bowed his head. A ripple of shock moved through the chamber. The king's eyes burned bright gold. "What is this?" Varkesh demanded. Daniel raised his gaze calmly. "He is not a spectacle," Daniel said in simple, steady words. "He is a patient." Silence fell like a blade. The dragon's head lifted slightly, just a few inches. But it lifted. For the first time since being dragged inside, it was not looking at the floor. It was looking at someone who did not see weakness. Around them, the alien nobles felt something unfamiliar creep into the room. Not fear, not laughter, doubt. King Varkesh's smile faded, and in that heavy silence, something small but powerful began to change. The dragon left the capital in silence. It was not carried with honor. It was transported like damaged cargo, inside a reinforced containment vessel bound for a distant human medical outpost near the edge of the empire. Most of the alien officers who signed the transfer papers believed they were sending it to die quietly. 3 days, one guard said before departure. For at most, no one expected it to survive the week. The outpost was small. It stood on a dry, red plain beneath a pale sky. The structure was built from simple steel and white composite panels, not the shining black stone of the imperial palace. There were no banners, no crowds, only wind. Daniel Hale waited at the landing pad when the transport arrived. When the doors opened, the dragon did not resist. It did not look at the soldiers. Its wings dragged against the floor as chains pulled it forward. Daniel raised a hand. "No chains," he said calmly. The alien escort commander hesitated, then shrugged. "It cannot fly." The chains were removed. The dragon swayed but did not fall. Inside the medical hangar, bright lights revealed the full damage. The scars along the spine were worse than they had appeared in the throne room. Burn marks, surgical cuts, nerve lines severed and fused without proper alignment. Daniel moved slowly around the creature, scanning with medical instruments. The readings confirmed what he had suspected. This was not natural weakness. This was deliberate, ceremonial mutilation. He reviewed the imperial records late into the night. The dragon had failed its first trial, a violent combat test required of all royal war dragons. Instead of immediate execution, the king had ordered correction. Correction had meant breaking the wings, severing neural channels that control plasma glands, stripping it of what made it powerful. Daniel sat back in his chair. "They hurt you on purpose," he said softly. The dragon lay on reinforced bedding in the center of the hangar. Its massive body barely moved, but one golden eye watched him. There was no rage in it, only something heavy. Daniel approached again, slower this time. "You were never defective," he continued. "You were punished." The dragon blinked once. It was a first clear response. Rehabilitation began the next morning. It was not dramatic. There were no sudden bursts of strength. The first sessions were simple nerve stimulation treatments and careful muscle exercises. Every movement caused pain. The dragon trembled often. When Daniel touched the damaged spine with a neural stimulator, the dragon flinched hard enough to crack part of the metal platform. "It's okay," Daniel said each time. "We go slow." The human staff kept their distance at first. Most had never worked with a dragon before. But as days passed, they began helping. Maria, the youngest technician, adjusted the support harness with careful hands. "He doesn't try to bite," she whispered one evening. "He doesn't want to fight," Daniel replied. Weeks passed. The dragon began to lift its head, without shaking. Then it shifted its weight from one leg to the other. The nerve repair treatment were painful, but the pathways slowly reconnected. One night, when a storm rolled across the Red Plains, thunder shook the outpost. The dragon startled, wings twitching. Instead of shrinking, it looked toward Daniel. He walked into the hangar without hesitation. "You're safe," he said. The dragon lowered its head slightly toward him. Trust was forming. Word began to spread beyond the outpost. Supply workers carried stories back to nearby settlements. Lower-class dragon handlers whispered in markets. Imperial workers shared quiet messages through hidden channels. The human is healing the king's shame. At first, the phrase was spoken with disbelief, then with curiosity. The Empire had long taught that weakness deserved removal, but the dragon was not weak if it had been harmed on purpose. What did that say about the throne? Daniel ignored the rumors. He focused on small victories, a twitch in the left wing, a stronger pulse in the plasma gland. The dragon's breathing grew deeper, healthier. One afternoon, after nearly 2 months of therapy, Daniel unclipped the support harness. The hangar was quiet. The entire human crew watched from the sides. Slow, Daniel said. The dragon shifted. Its front claws pressed against a reinforced floor. Its back legs trembled violently. For a moment, it looked as if it would collapse again. Daniel did not rush forward. He stood nearby, but he did not hold up. "You can," he said simply. The dragon's muscles strained. The repaired nerve lines sparked faint signals along its spine. Its wings spread slightly, not fully, but enough to balance. Then, slowly, carefully, the dragon rose. It stood, not tall, not proud. Its wings were still uneven. Its posture was unsteady, but it was standing on its own. No chains, no restraints. Silence filled the hangar. Maria covered her mouth. Daniel allowed himself a small breath of relief. The dragon lifted its head higher than it ever had in the throne room. Its eyes were different now. The shame was fading. Outside the outpost walls, the wind carried dust across the plains. Far beyond the horizon, whispers continued spreading through the empire. The king had tried to display weakness. Instead, something else was beginning to rise. And for the first time since its punishment, the dragon was no longer kneeling. It was standing. The first message left the outpost at dawn. It was not a speech. It was not a threat. It was a medical report. Daniel released the dragon's recovery data through open channels. He showed the scans, the nerve damage, the surgical cuts, the proof that the injuries were not natural. Across distant systems, workers and handlers watched in silence. Many of them had seen similar scars before. They remembered dragons who failed their first trials, dragons that did not burn hot enough, dragons that hesitated for a single second. Those creatures had not been healed. They had been culled. Now a question began to spread through markets, factories, and barracks. If this dragon was not defective, how many others were punished for nothing? The Empire had always taught one rule: strength through cruelty. The king's banners carried those words across every world. But doubt moves quietly. In the human outpost, the dragon continued its recovery. Its movements were smoother now. Its wings still bore scars, but they opened wider each day. The plasma glands responded to careful stimulation. One afternoon, Daniel stood in the training yard outside the facility. The ground was marked with steel targets placed at different distances. A small group of human staff watched from behind reinforced barriers. Daniel faced the dragon. "Slow," he said. "Controlled." The dragon lowered its head. Heat gathered in its throat. The air shimmered. A narrow stream of plasma burst forward. It did not explode. It did not spread wildly. It struck the center of the closest steel target and cut a clean circle through it. Precise. The dragon stopped immediately, breathing hard but steady. No chaos. No rage. Control. Daniel nodded once. "You see," he said quietly, "you were never broken." A journalist from a neutral trade world had arrived that morning. She recorded everything. Later that night, the footage spread beyond the red plains. Across crowded alien cities, screens flickered with the image of the once defective dragon standing tall, releasing control flame like a master craftsman instead of a weapon. Then Daniel appeared on the broadcast. He spoke simply. "It was never broken," he said. "It was betrayed." Those words traveled faster than any warship. In dragon hatcheries, young handlers replayed the message. In lower military ranks, soldiers exchanged silent looks. Some had watched dragons dragged away after minor failures. Now they wondered what might have been possible. Private messages began reaching the outpost. Encrypted, careful, lower-ranking dragon handlers asked questions about nerve repair, about rehabilitation, about alternatives to punishment. One message ended with a phrase that would soon echo through the empire. Mercy is not weakness. The phrase spread, quietly at first, written on walls, shared in hidden networks, whispered between shifts. The king's advisors reported unrest, minor disturbances, they said, but tension was building. On a mining colony in the outer belt, workers protested increased trial quotas for young dragons. Imperial security forces arrived in heavy armor. Orders were given to disperse the crowd. A riot broke out. Stun cannons fired. Civilians scattered. Above the chaos, a shadow moved. The healed dragon had traveled with Daniel to inspect a supply route. When the violence began, the dragon did not wait for orders. It stepped between the armored security line and the unarmed civilians. Its wings spread wide. Blaster fire struck its scales. Sparks flew, but it did not retaliate. It did not breathe fire. It did not attack. It shielded. A stun blast aimed at a fleeing child hit the dragon's side instead. The creature held its ground. Daniel shouted at the security commander to stand down. Cameras captured everything. The dragon's massive body blocked the line of fire completely. Its posture was defensive, not aggressive. The crowd slowly stopped running. Even the security soldiers hesitated. No one had ever seen a royal dragon act like this. Dragons were trained for dominance, for intimidation, for destruction, not protection. The footage streamed across the empire within hours. The image was clear. The once mock dragon, wings scarred but steady, shielding civilians from its own empire's weapons. The phrase returned stronger than before. Mercy is not weakness. On distant worlds, more protests began, not violent, but firm. Citizens demanded changes to the first trial system. Some dragon units delayed obedience. A few refused commands outright. The empire felt unstable. In the capital, inside the vast throne chamber of black marble and blue flame, King Varkesh watched the broadcast alone. The screen displayed the dragon standing between soldiers and civilians. It did not look effective. It looked powerful, but not in the way the king had taught. An advisor cleared his throat softly. "Your Majesty, shall we issue a statement?" The king did not answer at once. His golden eyes remained fixed on the screen. He remembered the day he dragged the creature into the same hall. The laughter, the humiliation, the human kneeling. Now the empire was whispering, not about weakness, about betrayal. The broadcast replayed Daniel's words. It was never broken. It was betrayed. King Varkesh's claws tightened against the arm of his throne. He did not laugh this time. The order came at night. It carried the royal seal and a single command: return the dragon to the capital for immediate execution. No trial, no debate. Daniel read the message twice in the quiet control room of the outpost. The screen glowed pale blue against his face. Outside, the wind moved across the red plains like a low warning. Maria stood behind him. "They're serious," she whispered. "Yes," Daniel said. He walked into the hangar. The dragon was resting, wings folded loosely at its sides. It lifted its head as he approached. It sensed the tension. Daniel placed a hand against its neck. "They're afraid of you now," he said softly. The dragon's eyes narrowed slightly, not in anger, in understanding. At dawn, Imperial warships appeared on the horizon. Black holes cut across the sky, engines roaring as they descended. Dropships detached and fell toward the outpost like metal rain. Inside the base, alarms sounded. Human staff gathered in the central corridor. Some were afraid. None of them ran. The first dropship landed hard on the sand outside. Rows of armored soldiers stepped out in perfect formation, plasma rifles locked and ready. At their front stood General Kale Varen, one of the king's most respected commanders. His armor was polished, his posture rigid. He opened a communication channel. "By order of King Varkesh, surrender the dragon immediately." Daniel stepped outside the main entrance alone. The desert wind tugged at his coat. "No," he said calmly. The general's visor tilted slightly. "You would defy the throne? I will not hand over a patient to be killed for political comfort." Behind Daniel, the dragon emerged from the hangar, its claws pressed into the red soil. Its wings unfolded slowly. scar lines visible in the morning light. The soldiers tightened their grip on their weapons. "Stand down," General Varen ordered his troops. Then he addressed Daniel again. "Move aside. This does not concern your kind. It concerns anyone who believes cruelty is strength," Daniel replied. News of the military arrival spread fast. Supply workers, miners, and nearby settlers rushed toward the outpost. Within an hour, hundreds of civilians stood between the soldiers and the hangar. Unarmed, unarmored, just standing. The dragon moved forward, placing itself at the front of the crowd. Its body formed a wall behind the civilians. Wings opened wide, not in threat, but in protection. A soldier raised his rifle. "Hold!" General Varen snapped. Tension crackled in the air. More warships appeared above. The sky darkened with their shadows. Across the Empire, live feeds streamed the confrontation. The king watched from his throne. "End this," he ordered through secure command channels. General Varen received the message. He stepped forward. "Last warning," he announced loudly. "Surrender the dragon." No one moved. A child near the front reached out and touched the dragon's leg. The creature did not flinch. Its head remained high. Behind the general, another officer spoke quietly. "Sir, public response is escalating. Dragon units in Sector 5 are delaying orders." Reports flooded in. 2 dragon squadrons had refused deployment. A 3rd unit had grounded itself in protest. The Empire's strongest weapons were hesitating. The king's voice came again through the general's comm link. "Fire!" The word hung heavy. Soldiers raised their rifles. Civilians did not run. The dragon stepped forward one more pace, fully shielding them. Its wings stretched to their widest point. Scarred, uneven, strong. General Varen looked at the sight before him. He had served the throne his entire life. He had overseen first trials. He had watched young dragons fail and be removed. He remembered their eyes. The same shame, the same silence. Now he looked at this dragon, standing without chains, protecting without rage. Not defective, disciplined. The general slowly lowered his weapon. A sharp intake of breath rippled through the ranks. "Sir?" one soldier asked. General Varen removed his helmet. His face was older than many expected. Lines of war and command etched deep across it. He turned toward the camera drones hovering above. "The beast is not defective," he said, voice steady but loud enough for the live broadcast. He paused. "We were." Shock exploded through command channels. The king stood from his throne in fury. "General Varen, you will obey." But it was too late. Several soldiers lowered their rifles. Then more. Behind them, a pair of dragon transports landed unexpectedly. Their ram doors opened. 2 war dragons stepped out, both bearing imperial marks. They did not advance on the outpost. They moved to stand beside the healed dragon. Across distant sectors, other dragon units transmitted refusal codes. The fracture spread. General Varen stepped back from the firing line. "I will not execute a symbol of our shame," he declared. The military formation broke. Some soldiers remained frozen. Others slowly retreated toward their ships. Above, one warship turned away from the outpost. Then another. In the desert, wind swept between civilians and soldiers alike. Daniel remained still beside the dragon. The creature's wings lowered slightly, but it did not bow. For the first time in imperial history, an order from a throne had been openly defied by its own military. Across the empire, citizens watched. Across the fleets, commanders hesitated. The foundation of fear that held the kingdom together began to crack. And the king, seated once more in his vast chamber of blue flame, understood something he had never feared before. Mercy had become stronger than obedience. The fracture did not close. It widened. After General Varen lowered his weapon, the Empire shifted faster than anyone expected. Dragon battalions across multiple systems stopped responding to direct throne commands. Some grounded their fleets. Others publicly declared suspension of first trials. Citizens filled city squares, not with torches, but with banners. Mercy is not weakness. The phrase moved from whispers to open declaration. The king issued new decrees daily. Arrest warrants, loyalty oaths, threats of execution. Fewer and fewer obeyed. Without the dragon's full support, the Empire's military presence weakened. Patrol routes shrank. Outer systems delayed tribute shipments. Governors requested clarification before enforcing punishments. Authority was no longer absolute. At the center of it all stood the dragon, once dragged across the marble floor. It did not lead armies. It did not burn cities. It traveled with Daniel from world to world, visiting hatcheries, training grounds, and military posts. It stood beside young dragons facing their first trials. It showed its scars openly, and it showed control. When it released flame now, it shaped it carefully, lighting signal towers, cutting debris from damaged ships, warming cold settlements. Protection replaced intimidation. The symbol changed. Daniel never gave speeches filled with anger. He spoke simply as he always had. The system is wrong, he would say, not the creatures inside it. Committees formed. Councils gathered. Lower-ranking officers stepped forward with records of past punishments. Evidence of ritual mutilation surfaced in official archives. Pressure moved inward toward the capital. Finally, the day came when the throne chamber doors opened not for spectacle, but for negotiation. King Varkesh stood alone at the center of the vast hall. No cheering court surrounded him now. No confident laughter echoed beneath the blue flames. Across from him stood Daniel, and beside Daniel stood the dragon, unchained, wings steady. The king looked older than before, not weaker, but uncertain. "You have torn my empire apart," Varkesh said. Daniel shook his head slightly. It was already breaking. The king's gaze shifted to the dragon. "I displayed you as failure," he said quietly. "Now they call you symbol." The dragon did not lower its head. The king stepped down from his throne once more, but this time there was no performance in his movements. "What do you want?" he asked. Daniel answered without hesitation. "End ritual mutilation." The words echoed across the chamber. End the culling of dragons who failed their first trial. Silence. Replace cruelty with stewardship. Teach strength without punishment. The king studied him carefully. "You demand reform," Varkesh said. "Not my crown." Daniel met his gaze calmly. "I don't want your throne." The king's eyes narrowed. "Why not take it?" he asked. "You have the dragons. You have the people. Why not rule?" Daniel glanced briefly at the dragon beside him. Then he looked back at the king. "Because we don't heal things to control them," he said evenly. "We heal them so they can stand on their own." The words settled into the chamber like final judgment. For a long moment, neither spoke. Outside, the capital waited. The king slowly turned toward his throne, the great seat carved from bone and victory. He looked at it differently now, not as a symbol of dominance, as a burden. Hours later, a decree spread across every imperial channel. The first trials were suspended, ritual mutilation outlawed, culling of imperfect dragons ended permanently. A new council formed, one that included dragon handlers, military officers, and civilian representatives. The throne remained, but its power was no longer absolute. Change did not come through invasion. It came through exposure. Days later, citizens gathered across the capital city, not for war, not for execution, for something they had never seen before. The dragon stood atop the highest tower overlooking the city. Wind moved through its scarred wings. Below, thousands watched in silence. Daniel stood near the edge of the platform but said nothing. The dragon looked down at the capital where it had once been dragged in chains. Then it stepped forward. Its wings spread wide, strong balance healed. It leapt. Gasps filled the air. The dragon caught the wind smoothly this time. No tremble, no fall. It rose above the palace towers. It circled once over the throne chamber, where humiliation had begun, not in conquest, not in dominance, in freedom. Sunlight reflected off its scales as it climbed higher. Its shadow passed over the crowd below, not as a threat, but as reassurance. The empire did not burn. It did not fall to ash. It changed, not because it was conquered, not because its enemies destroyed it, but because someone chose mercy when cruelty was easier, and that choice proved stronger than fear.